Hi, good morning, and welcome to our show. Today we're gonna discuss the question: does the culture of a country predict a change in the trust of its government, regardless of the success said government on the handling of the coronavirus pandemic? My colleague Nicole will be asking questions
Everyone, welcome to WG News. We have here really important reporters from around the world. Guys, before introducing you, I just want to thank you for being here. I know you're very busy people, and thank you for making it to the show. So we have here Isabella from Taiwan, Zaiboon from Canada, Juan Pablo from Sweden, and Sami from Japan. Good morning, guys. How are you?
Yeah, so for Taiwan, at least we're doing wonderful at the moment. Since May, we've only had a maximum of 4 cases a day. Usually we have 0 cases a day, locally transmitted at least. And the highest number of cases that we actually had through the whole pandemic was 31 cases on the 19th of March. However, we already had strict protocol, so it wasn't that big of an issue.
On July 27, 2020, the World Health Organization actually recognized Canada as one of the countries who did well in controlling the pandemic. Overall, the data does indicate that we've been able to flatten the curve enough for our healthcare system to recover from the initial wave in March, as illustrated in this graph.
In Sweden, 5,892 deaths and 97,532 cases have been reported, mainly concentrated in Stockholm and Västra Gotland.
In Japan, there were very low cases in the first wave of the pandemic, especially comparing to other OECD countries. However, Japanese people would like to compare with other countries in the region, and compared to Hong Kong, Taiwan, Australia, New Zealand, we are very, very bad.
The next question goes to Taiwan. What was your country's response to the pandemic?
Thank you so much, Nicole, for the question. For Taiwan, we wanted to make sure that we really kept everyone safe, and that starts with the arrival. So with our response, we make sure that everyone stays at least for a 2-week quarantine on arrival, ensuring that they get welcome packages, daily check-ins, stipends if they need for accommodation. And we also use geofencing technology for this to make sure that we don't have local transmissions coming from arriving transmissions.
Canada's key measure in response to the COVID-19 pandemic was promoting social distancing. So by late March, lockdowns were in effect nationally, borders were closed to foreigners, and the Quarantine Act was implemented, meaning any Canadian citizen who were to enter the borders would have to quarantine themselves for 2 weeks or face fines.
As you know, the measures that Sweden implemented do not seem to be working very well. A strict quarantine was not implemented. Schools did not close completely. Only social distancing was recommended.
In Japan, there were non-mandatory COVID regulations, and the government only appealed citizens to stay at home, which most people actually did. However, there was a lot of intransparency from the government. They did not announce exactly what the reasons were to postpone the Olympics 2020.
What is the take on people's response in your country?
In Taiwan, I describe it as a positive and unifying response from the people. Taiwan has always been a patriotic country, but a small country. And we've really pulled through as one during these unprecedented times.
In terms of Canada, though there were some protests against the lockdown and mask wearing protocol, the vast majority of Canadians feel more unified as a result of the pandemic.
Sweden is a country with people who do not have a collectivistic culture. People did not act differently from the government and continued to go out to the streets to do all their activities.
Said before, people's response to the measures were positive because Japanese people have collectivistic culture and they want to save each other. However,
overall, how do you think that the pandemic has shape-shifted the trust in government in your country?
So when it came time for this pandemic, what happened was fast government measures that really helped stop the curve early on. And diverging from China's initial findings, and also because Taiwan doesn't have access to WHO findings as it's technically classified under China, we were able to then instead push for nonpartisan and non-biased science to drive policy, which helped boost the confidence of the people.
What means is that Canada was really able to work in the interest of its people. It put aside its political differences between federal and provincial governments, and really just decided to work in favor of its people and prioritizing everyone's safety. As a result, Canadian trust in government has actually risen a lot during the pandemic, from 50% in 2019 to 70% now. People feel very...
Management of the pandemic has become politicized. Confidence in the government was in 50% and has decreased by 11 points since April, which seems logical due to the poor handling of the crisis.
Trust in the government has been low ever since 1990. On top of that, the public's approval of government's pandemic management is one of the lowest in the world, and the overall distrust of government has increased since the beginning of the pandemic, even though the cases and deaths are comparably low.
Thank you so much for sharing your opinions with everyone. Back to the studio with Sebastian.
I hope we have been able to provide some answers to the question of how culture can predict the changing trust of government. I want to thank all the participants for coming to this discussion with us today. The main point that can be taken away from this conversation is that it doesn't matter either the cultural values or the outcome of the pandemic response that the government had. Government trust is very strongly tied to the transparency and clarity of the policies that each government places. Thank you for watching.